We now turn to the special report I've been promising. This was a historic hearing today, and there were big issues teed up. Is President Trump's conduct impeachable? As we were just discussing, Mueller won't say. Was Trump wrong to welcome Russia's hacking? Yes. He testified it was unpatriotic. But is there evidence that Trump committed obstruction of justice? That is actually where one of the most fascinating, important exchanges occurred, and I want you to see it in context. This was under questioning by Democratic Congressman Jeffries. And maybe it's not a coincidence that this is the topic where Mueller's very careful, very lawyerly, confirming troubling evidence against Trump and saying that Jeffries may be in the ballpark while stressing he won't co-sign the whole analysis.
I don't subscribe necessarily to your the way you analyze that. I'm not saying it's out of the ballpark, but I'm not supportive of that analytical charge.
What got Mueller speaking so carefully? A damning section of the Mueller report teeing off one of the most counterproductive tweets Donald Trump ever sent, admitting he was under criminal investigation. So now let's look at this morning's exchange in the news at the time.
President Trump tweeted on June 16, 2017, quote, "I am being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director. Witch hunt."
The President of the United States now confirming that he is under investigation along with his son-in-law.
Constitutes a public acknowledgement by President Trump that he was under criminal investigation, correct?
I think generally correct.
Mueller confirms that Trump was tweeting scared and was upset about the investigation, which can make Trump look guilty because it speaks to his motives when he tried to get Mueller fired, which happened the very next day after the tweet. Now, Jeffries asked Mueller about that, which was huge news when that broke.
On Saturday, June 17th, President Trump called White House counsel Don McGahn at home and directed him to fire the special counsel. True?
Another damaging report linked to the Russia probe that Mr. Trump gave an explicit order to have special counsel Robert Mueller fired just a month after he was appointed.
I believe it to be true.
That was big. Trump sprinting towards the kind of Saturday Night Massacre that led to the end of the Nixon presidency. Now, today, Mueller says under oath what his report documented, that Trump did try to take that potentially illegal act, something Trump would then reportedly try to do even more than once. And today, Mueller spoke to the checklist required to prove whether there is a crime of obstruction. You have to say, well, is there a probe to obstruct in the first place? Check. Is there an obstructive act? Check. And then the hardest to prove, was there criminal intent in taking that act? Goes to that last box to check, criminal intent, showing that not only someone tried to obstruct, but why, something we've been discussing in our coverage tonight. And this is when Jeffries highlights an important part of the Mueller report. There's no Watergate taping system, but Mueller came somewhat close going into the inner sanctum of the Oval Office. Trump saying, when he learned of the special counsel's appointment, "Oh my God, this is terrible. It's the end of my presidency. I'm effed." The suggestion is that maybe his motive wasn't Mueller's alleged conflicts, but stopping the whole probe. It was a substantive moment by the time you had those different boxes checked. If Congress accepts Representative Jeffries' logic, it would find the elements of this alleged crime. And that's why I want you to see something. One of the most iconic moments from today may not be an individual soundbite, but this news photograph capturing each of those checked boxes on obstruction regarding the effort to fire Mueller with the committee's legal analysis right inside the room. You'll notice those checked boxes are in sharp focus. Mueller positioned the way he actually prefers, out of focus. And ultimately, you're looking at a snap portrait in the spirit of Mueller because it focuses on the evidence that was uncovered and leaves Mueller and his investigators where he thinks they belong, out of focus. And let's remember, Mueller's already said the evidence should speak for itself, a classic maxim in law. And while a hearing always is going to have these reactions to the witness and how he sounded, for one moment tonight, before I bring in another special guest, it is worth reflecting on this substance from today.
When a subject of an investigation obstructs that investigation or lies to investigators, it strikes at the core of their government's effort to find the truth and hold wrongdoers accountable. The work speaks for itself. And the report is my testimony.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.